Who doesn't love the idea of free travel? You just swipe your card for your everyday stuff, points just kind of show up in your account, and suddenly you're picturing yourself on a beach, sipping a cocktail, and it's all paid for. That's the dream, right? That's the whole seductive promise of the credit card rewards game. But it's a world that has some incredible highs and some pretty serious hidden lows.
So that's really the big question we're going to dig into here. Is any of this travel actually free? I mean, the ads make it look so easy, but as a ton of people have found out the hard way, there's often a massive gap between the glossy promise and the frustrating reality. And to really get a grip on what's at stake here, you first have to understand just how enormous this whole industry is. We're not talking about some small little perk. This is like a fundamental piece of the modern financial world. Okay, just look at this number for a second. According to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that's the CFPB, people earned over $40 billion in rewards in 2022, just in 1 year. I mean, that's just a mind-boggling amount of value floating around, and it really shows you how important these programs are for the banks and for us. And as you can see here, these cards are everywhere. By the end of 2022, a whopping 75% of all general-purpose credit cards were rewards cards. So the odds are pretty high that if you have a credit card in your wallet right now, you're already in the game, whether you know it or not. Okay, so you've done the work, you've racked up all these points, you're ready to book that dream trip, and then, bam, you hit a wall. This is where we move from that huge promise to what is, for many, a really frustrating reality. And this comment from a Reddit user just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures that feeling of confusion. You're told you'll get incredible value when you transfer points, but then you do the math and they're somehow worth less than just getting cash back. It's super frustrating and honestly a really common feeling. And really, that leads to this common feeling you see all over the internet. To get that amazing value everyone talks about, you have to be doing constant research, you have to be super flexible with your travel dates. You basically need to become an expert on a dozen different loyalty programs. For most of us, it's less of a perk and more like taking on a part-time job you didn't ask for. And for the folks who really dive deep, this thing called card churning to get those sign-up bonuses, well, the risks get even more real. Listen, every time you apply for a new card, your credit score can take a little hit. If you're not careful, you could end up with high balances that wreck your utilization ratio. And honestly, just trying to juggle all those due dates can be a recipe for disaster. On top of all that, banks are pushing back with things like the infamous Chase 524 rule, which can lock you out of new cards completely. All right, so we've talked about the headaches, but how do people actually win this game? Because they do. There are absolutely proven strategies out there, but they definitely require some discipline and a little bit of insider knowledge. Okay, the number one thing you've got to understand is this idea of transferable points. So instead of being stuck with, say, just one airline, these are points you earn with a bank, like Chase or Amex, that you can then send to tons of different airline and hotel partners. That flexibility, that is everything. It's the secret sauce to finding those unbelievable deals. Now, about those huge sign-up bonuses, you've got to hit a spending goal, right? Often thousands of dollars in just a few months. So the pros over at places like the Points Guy suggest things like this. You can prepay your insurance. Or next time you're out with friends, you offer to put the big dinner on your card and just have everyone Venmo you back. But the key here, and this is super important, is to do this without spending money you wouldn't normally spend. And this is the real secret. This is what separates the casual points earner from the experts. Forget economy tickets. That's not where the magic is. The real home run is when you use your points to book a business or first-class seat. The ones that would have cost $5, $10, maybe even $15,000 in cash. That is how you turn a pile of points into a trip that would have been completely out of reach. But, and this is a big but, even if you play the game perfectly, things can go wrong. There's kind of a darker side to all of this, where the rules can change on you in a heartbeat. Let's dive into what the government's own consumer watchdog has uncovered. Yeah, this chart right here, it's pretty alarming. The CFPB found that in 2023, complaints about credit card rewards programs skyrocketed by more than 70% from before the pandemic. So we're not talking about a few unlucky people here. This points to a real, growing problem with how these programs are being run. And this really gets to the heart of the problem. The huge gap between what they promise you and what's buried in the fine print. They sell you on valuable points, but the reality is they can change that value whenever they want. They promise you easy redemption, but then a technical glitch makes your points vanish, and the bank and the airline just blame each other while you're just stuck in the middle.
So the CFPB is calling out three main issues here, and they basically feel like a classic bait and switch. First, there's devaluation. The points you worked so hard to earn can lose value overnight. Then you have these hidden conditions, where banks can take your rewards away using these super vague excuses like gaming the system. And finally, you've got those redemption failures, where your points just get lost in the digital ether during a transfer.
So after all that, where does it leave us? On the one hand, these rewards can genuinely unlock amazing experiences. But on the other, it's a complicated game with a rulebook that can change at any moment. So what's the verdict? Are credit card rewards this amazing tool for the smart consumer, or is it a dangerous game where the house usually wins? I think the real question is, are you just a customer, or are you ready to be a player?